Hello, friends, and welcome to the show. Today's episode is with my friend Theora Moench. Theora is the founder of Truly Chosen. Truly Chosen is a company that specializes in working with executives, business owners, professional athletes, just really high performers, and helping them find that true romantic love, helping them find those great relationships that we all typically want at some level, right? And at least in my life, I'm single now. I've been single for a couple years now. Relationship challenges have just seemed to be part of life and something we've accepted, right? And deep down, I've always felt there's something more, and I know there's bigger connection opportunities out there, and I know there is a space, in my heart to find a good long-term partner eventually. It's just a matter of doing all the right things to make that happen. And that's what Theora specializes in. And we talk a lot about that. We talk about a lot of dating myths, relationship myths, a lot of mistakes people are making in early on in relationships, as well as ways you can spruce up your dating profile. So I really enjoyed this. I even joked with her in the show that this was a great consulting session for me because it really ended up being. So I know you'll enjoy it as well. And just as a heads up, and this is just going to happen as we're recording all these remote right now, there are a few minor audio issues on her end throughout the show. No big deal. Just wanted to give a quick disclaimer there. As we grow the show and things get back to normal, the plan is to do more of these in person. But right now, we're going to continue to deliver the best quality audio and video we can. And yeah, I do hope you enjoy the show.
This is Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams, where differing opinions are not only accepted, they're encouraged.
All right, we are live. Theora, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and happy to see you.
Yeah, I'm happy to see you as well. Speaking of that, do you remember where and when we actually met?
Yeah, the 30 under 30, right?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
Good job. Good job. I put you on the spot there. So I believe that was January of 2017, because I was actually just talking to Michael Ambrosino about that.
Totally. I'm still connected to a lot of you gentlemen.
Yeah.
And I get like random messages.
Do you keep in touch with anybody from the group? That was a really solid group, wasn't it?
Yeah. I've seen Ben over the years, Alex, Ryan, or Jeremy. He lives in Israel now. He was the co-founder of Dow Cloud.
Is it Max? Was that his name?
No. The other gentleman. I think he changed his name to like a Hebrew name. Anyway.
Oh. I don't know if I've ever met anybody that's changed their first
Calvin.
name before. Calvin, yep.
Yeah.
Eric Allred. Do you keep in touch with him?
We kept in touch for about a year, but I think not in the last year or so.
Awesome. How is Portland right now? Obviously, like you hear on the news, like Portland's like some crazy shit's going down. How is it being a resident of Portland? Or is the news exaggerating?
The news is exaggerating like so much. So the protests take place in like a little like 2-block strip, and that's it. So the rest of the city is proceeding as usual. There have been peaceable marches. So when the protests first began, there were different grassroots organizers, different community organizers. And so there were actually multiple marches happening each day. And I went to some of the ones that were on the east side of town, which they would end in a park. And then there would be like a couple hours of speeches, really creating space for like citizens of color to talk about their experience or share poetry or sing music and like multi-generational. It was actually it was really powerful to be in a setting where like public discourse was being encouraged and people were like very respectfully holding space. Because I don't know if you know, but Oregon has an incredibly racist history. and is like the whitest city in America, I think.
Portland is pretty
Um,
white, right?
it's very, very white, very homogenous. So we have a very, I think, we have like some stuff to come to terms with as a municipality. And yeah, so I think in that sense, to like see so many people, especially people that were like have not been engaged in this conversation, to like be showing up and learning and really like listening to their neighbors. So I think in that sense, it really felt very much like a democratic process in action, you know, where like people who don't know each other coming together and like talking about what it's like to live in the same space and like create understanding. And then there was a group that would congregate outside of the Justice Center downtown. And late in the night, when basically, I think like when police wanted crowds to disperse, they would start to use, you know, tear gas and rubber bullets and that sort of thing. And so that was really like, so those clashes would happen between like midnight and beyond. But then when federal troops showed up, like the protests, all of the different organized, so I don't think this was the federal intent, but it like really galvanized all of the organizations to create a coalition. And so then the protests like expanded tenfold, brought a lot of attention so it actually like brought a lot more attention to the BLM movement, which I don't think that they wanted, but like brought a lot more support because a lot of people didn't want federal interference in, you know, like what we're trying to figure out as a city. And so then all of the protests, instead of like them being dispersed throughout the city, have convened on this one area downtown.
Got it. Yeah, from my Florida view, right, which
Yeah.
I don't think anybody has an issue, or like I personally don't have an issue with more focus on BLM. I think it's more of just the violence side of it, burning shit down, riots. And if you're telling me that that's not as bad as what the news is saying, then maybe that's a good thing. So you still just for the most part, everybody's just living life like normal up there. Like you don't feel unsafe walking around or anything.
No, no. I mean, to say that Portland's under siege is like, it's like so banana. I think that's where like, I don't know. I'm sure you see this too, but there's just like so much distrust of like leadership, including like corporate leadership, political leadership, like media leadership, because I know for us, right, like feeling like you're saying this thing of a city of, you know, 1 million people, and this thing's happening in like I remember I was doing a photo shoot downtown 2 blocks away or 3 blocks away from the protests, and it was like fine, you know. And then to like see the news being like, I mean, I think what's happening is like some really concerning things are happening with like corrosion of civil liberties, and like people getting detained and not being read their rights and not being told who's detaining them, and like that kind of stuff is pretty freaking scary for a democracy to be grappling with. But yeah, it's definitely being like dramatized and being made very theatric, I think, in order to distract from like the conversation that's trying to happen.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, and I also have a distrust for government leadership, which is why I'm like very libertarian, or at least somewhat libertarian. So why Portland is there a more progressive city in the country than Portland? I mean, Seattle, Portland, they probably are 1 and 2,
I'm
right?
not sure. Yeah.
So if
Yeah, I'm
there's
not
the
sure.
distrust in government leadership, why do like, and again, I could be wrong about this, but it seems like cities like Portland want more government while there's simultaneously a distrust in government leadership.
Yeah, I think that might be an oversimplification to say that they want more government. I think they want different government.
Got it.
I would say that like people left to their own devices aren't the greatest. And so like creating structures of accountability is, I mean, I'm like not a, like a poli-sci expert or anything, but like, uh, I think what we're actually getting the opportunity right now is to reimagine what government could look like
Got it.
what public safety could look like. And so, yeah, I mean, there's definitely like, I mean, I would say they're calling for like the abolishment of like the way we know the police to be right now, and like are calling for like a reimagining of like what a public safety force. Oh my gosh, I have this on Do Not Disturb. Um, Sorry, I had this on Do Not Disturb. I don't know why it's still ringing.
Must be a favorite. Uh,
Okay, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's in my partner. So I think there's actually I think there's a lot more in common when people like slow down to talk to each other versus call each other stupid.
I agree completely.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I would say I identify as like quite progressive socially. Um, like very much like civil rights advocate. Um, but I'm not like tax us blindly and like build, like how many administrators can we get in the building? You know what I mean? Um, it's more of like I do believe that government can be powerful in the way that I want to see like pretty sweeping reforms, which
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean bigger government, but is like a yearning to be like, hey, what we've done so far has gotten us here, and we need something different to get us where I think we could
So,
ultimately go into.
and I agree completely, by the way. Like, I have friends that are left of me, right of me. And if you just like sit down with a bunch of people in a room, like, there's not too many things where we're just super far off on. Like, even people like super far right that are for abortion, like pro life, they're like, okay, well, if it's before 3 months, like there's just like even that, which is like probably one of the most controversial things of our time, there's still some common ground there. And like even people pro choice, which I'm, you know, I'm more pro choice. I think a lot of conservatives I know, I understand and agree with their point. And I think it's a really tough argument that will go, we'll still be arguing about it until you and me are both dead. But even pro-choice people are like, okay, maybe 3 months is so there's like so much common ground. And I feel like as a race, as a society, if we could just chat more and not call people dumb, I 1,000% agree. We would get further. The reason I'm not anti-government, I'm just like weary of government. It's just because we think government is like this super smart superior force, I feel like, and I don't feel that way because it's just people like you and me that are going to make a million mistakes. Like if you were governor of Oregon or I was governor of Oregon, we would make just as many mistakes as they would. Like we're all human, and I know how many mistakes humans can make because I make tons of them. And I guess
Mhm.
that's where I'm just like I just get a little bit cautious about big government in that sense. It's like, hey, let's
Yeah.
keep us safe. Let's create equal opportunity for people. Let's protect people's rights. But beyond that, it's like people in government are just dummies like myself, and that's why I don't put too much trust in them.
Yeah, I think big government becomes scarier when as we've watched the checks and balances between the different branches dissolve, right? Where people are more party loyal than they are. It's almost like if everybody in Congress was more loyal to being in Congress than they were to their party, then we would still have these checks and balances amongst party members,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, and I actually think it's very much been designed to oversimplify and incite division. I mean, I think it's very much by design that.
I
the
agree.
dialogue is where it is.
I agree. And I believe most people also are closer to the center than we give credit for. I think the extremes on both sides have a giant voice, but I don't think like a big chunk of the country is made up of extreme right or extreme left. But anywho, I'm glad your apartment's not burned down. That's good.
Yeah,
If
no.
it was burnt down, we wouldn't be able to chat today. So thank
Yeah.
God the rioters didn't make it down to your apartment. And but anyway, so I'm excited to like. I was really excited. I just got back from the pool. Like a few times a week, I'll spend like an hour at the pool, get some sun, just relax, listen to an audiobook. And I was like really looking forward to this conversation because I think executives in particular can have a lot of challenges in relationships, different challenges that maybe non-executives and non-entrepreneurs wouldn't understand. So, with that being said, can you share with everybody, about your company and what you do and what you specialize in?
Yeah. Um, so I'm a dating and relationship expert, and I would say that I call my company like a dating and relationship consulting agency, because we're very much about combining three different approaches to creating the relationship you want. Like one is practical strategy, which I think a lot of people in the space either like overemphasize or underemphasize. There's also the energetic game, right? Like mindset, the way that you're like energetic and spiritual. And then there's also the I would say like neurological, biological. So understanding that we are socialized differently as men, women process data differently, which informs that we communicate differently. So we really take this three-pronged approach to helping people create relationships that are as extraordinary as they really want them to be, versus collapsing into a status quo, which really encourages settling and reinforces the story that what you want probably isn't out there for you. So you might as well take the best thing that you think you can get right now, or stay single forever, even if you don't want to, which I would say is equally a lame result.
Do you
Did I
think?
make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you feel like some people are meant to like be more single forever, or do you believe everybody is meant to have like a good romantic partner?
I don't know if it's a meant to sort of situation. So I use a lot of, unsurprisingly, like entrepreneurial metaphors. So think about it like you're the product, and you're the product of the service, and then you're the partner that that you're potentially like looking for, or like starting to consider, that you'd like to call into your life, is the ideal client, right? And it's not about like, oh, like nobody wants my service, like I guess like, right, it's like, no, you have to overcome these BS stories that like there isn't a market for it and all this stuff, and really just hone in on who your ideal client is, and then intelligently orient yourself so that you can like cross paths with higher quality leads.
So that makes complete sense. And I weirdly enough, I kind of think that way and I say stuff like that to friends and they look at
Mhm.
me crazy because I do say it's like I'm like I'll say things along the lines like I'm funneling leads and I'm like things. So is that sort of a process that you advise? Is that similar, or am I like way out there saying I'm like nurturing leads and like warming them and just like a sales type of role?
I definitely borrow from it. I think like anything, if I think it's a very like clever, interesting way to think about it, because it takes you out of like default thinking, which is like good men or women are hard to find, relationships are hard. Like there's just the by and large, the conventional wisdom we have around dating and relationships is incredibly low caliber thinking. And so I think using like a marketing metaphor of, yeah, like having a funnel, nurturing leads, qualifying leads, pre-positioning leads, right? Like I think that's actually a really helpful, empowering way to do it, as long as you're really connected to like an ethical, beautiful outcome.
Yeah.
right? If it's about like using your marketing know-how to like manipulate a woman into liking you, it's like, oh, let's ask some like higher quality questions. If you're more in the position of being like, I'm really clear on what I want and what I want to co-create with somebody, and I'm using this strategy in order to help me connect with women who are like, oh my gosh, yes, like we are absolute, like what we want to create is so in sync, and we're attracted to each other, and we're building healthy communication with each other. And then I'm like, what an awesome tool and strategy to bring to the table to collapse time and like speed up the process.
Do you ever hear the term, and it drives me crazy because I hear it in business and I feel like I hear it in dating too. It's just like there's no good men or women in this town.
Yes.
There's no good
Mm-hmm.
business prospects in this town. And I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, I'll hear that in Orlando. Like, guys are assholes in Orlando. I'm like, there's like a million plus people in Metro Orlando. I'm sure there's some nice guys in
Yeah.
Orlando. The only time I'd buy that is if you're in a 100-person town. Like, maybe you're right. You vetted them all, and there's just not a compatibility. But 99.9% of the people I hear saying that in business, I just feel that's an unhealthy mindset. Do you work through stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've heard that from literally every, or I shouldn't say literally, but like virtually every client, like whether they live in Dubai or Chicago or like middle of nowhere, Michigan or San Diego or Melbourne, like it doesn't matter. It's like there's like the dating culture here sucks. There's no good prospects, and that's because well, we'll just keep using the entrepreneurial metaphor, right? Which is just like you think lead gen is your issue, and it's not,
Yeah.
right? Or it could be, but it's just defaulting to lead gen versus understanding that like there's probably something going on in the way that you're showing up. Like, but your marketing might be repellent, or your marketing is attracting the wrong ICAs, or you know what I mean?
What's an
Um,
ICA?
Ideal client avatar,
Ah, got it. Okay.
right? So your marketing. So for example, here I'll bring this into like the like applicable. So something I've done with a lot of my clients who want to play with the online space is we'll like look at their profile, and we'll do a makeover of their dating profile, because either you're getting lost in the noise or you're sticking out from the crowd with a dating profile. And so we'll go and I'll be like, okay, what do you want? And it'll say something like open to kids. And I'll be like, okay, well, tell me a little bit, like, what's your vision for like family or not, right? And by and large, it'll be something like, oh, I really want kids. And I'm like, okay, cool. So if you're saying open to kids, you've immediately created a filter that's not necessarily clarified. Or it's like, well, I don't really want kids, but if he really wanted it, I'd be open to it. I'm like, why don't you just go for the guy that doesn't want kids and start there? And then if for whatever reason you run out of options, you can always like dilute and compromise what you want. But by and large, I see people misrepresenting themselves and really diluting themselves down on their profiles. And then they're like, I don't understand why I keep matching with these people who don't want what I want. It's like, well, because you're not actually saying what you want. So instead of repelling the people, right? Instead of like more powerfully repelling and more powerfully magnetizing, you're getting lukewarm leads because you've got lukewarm marketing.
Yeah, polarization is key, right? So what do you feel? I'm asking for a friend. No, I'm just kidding. I'm asking for me. Uh, what are some of the most common things you see in dating profiles? I actually deleted my dating apps this year. I feel better because it for me, I don't know, I felt like it was like draining my self-esteem because I would match with all these girls and then just the conversations were really stale and boring and like many weren't leading anywhere, and I'm just like, I'd rather just go talk to people in person where I have more control rather than just trying to beg for somebody's attention online, which I don't beg, but that's almost, I feel like, oftentimes what you have to do. It's a lot of energy to invest in dating
Mm-hmm.
apps. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm only sharing that because I just made the decision earlier this year to delete mine, which has been good. I felt a lot better because of it. But what, if I do reinstate, what are some common like dumb things you see on dating profiles are just easy fixes that could get you better quality matches?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think it's really important to think about online dating in the context with which it was created. And it was created to serve a need for convenience, right? So in some ways, I kind of think of it as like buying cold traffic. Like there's going to be a lot of chaff that falls off versus like what you're doing, which is like, and is like organic lead gen, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it's like coming into it and like with online dating is really bringing in a mentality of like, this was designed for convenience. And, I guess, I don't, are you open to sharing like what it is that you want in relationship? Like, are you at a point where you're like, I want my person or,
I my mindset, and this is from years of therapy and coaching, is like I don't want to just put out in the universe like I really want a relationship. I'm not comfortable with that. What I do want is quality connection with people of all types, and if that ends up leading to a relationship as a byproduct, great. I personally, it doesn't feel right for me to be like I want a relationship. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm open. If it makes sense, we'll get married one day and have family. I think I'd be a great husband and a great father, just with all the work I've done and that I continue to do. But I don't want to like be like, I have to get married. I need a relationship. So that's where I'm at
yeah.
personally.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Um, yeah. So like step one is like clarity, right? And so the other question I would ask you about oh man, okay, so many things there. Okay. La la la. What was the first question before I go off on a total tangent?
What are just some things
Oh,
like
dumb stuff in.
easy things, ways you can improve your dating profile, like man or woman?
Okay, so I have like a whole guide I created about this. So the first things first is like this may be counterintuitive, right? But it's kind of like good copy is like don't make your profile about you. Make your profile really about what you're looking for and the kind of partnership you want to co-create. So yes, like obviously you want to share pictures that demonstrate who you are, the things that you're most passionate about, especially. But I always say like think about this as like writing your profile for your reader, and versus because when anybody sits down to use a dating app, they flip through what like 30 to a couple hundred faces, depending on how long they're zoning out. And so if you're hoping that they're gonna like look at your profile and like really try to see the person behind and it's just like that's just not how people are interacting with it, right? People are like, what's in this for me? That's just the basic question. And so I usually tell people like pick photos that represent areas of your life that you most want to share with a partner, and like pick the things that feel the hardest to be met, right? So if like you're a jet setter and you love traveling and maybe you've dated someone in the past who was more of a homebody and you're like, oh, I could not be with somebody who was a homebody, then I'm like, put some pictures of you traveling, right? Because again, repel or magnetize. Like you have so little landscape on a profile that maximizing every little element that's what's going to save you time. The next is I use the text areas to like talk about the person that you're like, I'm looking for somebody who values X or wants to create this or sees themselves this way. And then the kind of partnership I want to co-create with them looks like A, B, C, D. And I also work with people who are at the plot point where they're like, okay, like business and career is great. Health is good. Like love is the last missing piece. And they're really ready for the partnership. They're ready for the chapter that like is characterized by sharing their life with somebody. So I'm going to speak in those terms of somebody that's like at that plot point. And so what I see that's ineffective is like diluting and like trying to be like, I call it like cool, cute, and casual, you know? Like I like yoga and tacos and hiking. And I'm like, yeah, dude, everybody. Or like I like to laugh, or I'm looking for someone who's kind, you know? And it's like, these are such virtually everybody perceives themselves as kind, unless maybe they like self-identify as sarcastic, right? Versus like really zeroing in on the things that make you unique, right? So I'm oftentimes like, share the things that you feel like are the hardest to love about you, and then also ask for the things that feel like they're going to be the hardest to find.
That's really good.
Um, yeah, and that's what like
I got a
I kind
whole
of like.
list, Theora, of things that are hard to love about me. So I wonder if there's enough text space on the dating app. I'm writing that down here.
There's messaging strategy too.
Yeah, I have to combine a bunch of words, I guess.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and so and then is also again like remembering it in the context of its design. So like most people are using the app with a certain level of like disappointment and discouragement and disenchantment. And so I like to think of use online dating as one tool in your toolbox, but I have found that most people relegate all of their effort into just online dating. And then when they're out moving through the world, they are not showing up in such a way that they are like connecting intentionally and powerfully, or like doing the brave thing and going and talking to that woman who like the minute you walked in, you were like, whoa, she's got a presence about her. Right. And I was the same way where like I figured out how to use dating apps and was like having fun, was getting asked out on all these dates. And was like, okay, I feel like I've like hacked this code. I'm getting asked out. Because I would talk to some people who would say, I never get asked out. I was like, what? Like, and they're beautiful and charismatic and awesome. And so like I kind of like cracked the code. And then I was like, honestly, I was noticing that because I had this like super casual, like sort of convenient, low risk tool at the ready, then I wasn't showing up like powerfully out in real life. Like I had kind of this back door on like, and I noticed that when I went into a coffee shop and I saw this man working and he had like that, you know what I mean? That kind of like the je ne sais quoi, like, whoa. And I walked and like, so what would you do if you like somebody? It's like, oh, like, I don't know, like maybe like look over at them and like maybe like see if they look up or like say hello or something, like engage, be available but because I had relegated and given a monopoly to the apps to like be where my love life occurred, I didn't show up at all. And I remember like leaving, I could have said hello, I could have smiled, like anything. And instead of like walking away from the coffee shop, what just happened? I was like, oh, because I had the dating apps open and available, I've stopped being available organically. So I stopped using it. It was so much more fun for me to connect organically with people. So
It must have been a special connection if you still remember it and are using it as an example. Wow.
No. It was not that special of a connection. It was more watching myself be like a wimp, you know?
No, that
because it was like, oh, I don't have to be brave right now.
there are like, and this is me being vulnerable. I mean, there definitely have what I've been challenging myself to do. And again, I'm far from perfect at this, but the last couple years I've been really trying to be more brave and courageous and talking to girls and asking to make plans and even just randomly like in my elevator, just being like, what are you up to? What are you doing tonight? Just like stuff like even a few years ago, I would have been like too scared. And there's still times that I remember like girls that I thought were just amazingly beautiful, but more than that, there was just something, I don't even know what to call it, you know more than me, but like it's not just physical looks, it's just like their aura, like, and I still remember just like pussying out and not even talking to them, and like it's been glued in my mind. Like I don't remember like super specific details, but stuff from like years ago I'll remember like, man, I thought this girl was like beautiful, etc., and I just wimped out. So I've been challenging myself to get out of my comfort zone in those cases. Do you believe that the man should, in 2020 and in Portland, do you believe that the man should approach the woman still if he's interested?
I don't know if it's not a question of should. So first and foremost, I like the mentality I bring to dating is like, think of it as though you're running an experiment, right? Like try it and see what happens.
Yeah.
I think like for example, like let's say you'd gone up to that woman and you'd spoken to her. Let's play out a few things. One, she could have said no, right? And that would have been disappointing. But like you shot your shot, right? Another is maybe she could have like laughed at you and ridiculed you. In which case, that's a pretty fucking epic information to indicate to you like that's not somebody that I would want to be with. Or she could have said yes.
Yeah.
Right. So when all is said and done, if you start to run dating like it's an experiment and like you're collecting data to qualify leads, it starts to you're not going to be able to avoid uncomfortable stuff, right? But you get to start to you get to be in a more observational role, and it kind of creates this degree of separation of like, I should know how to do this, I should be perfect at it, I should know all the right things. I should know all the right things to do before ever trying them, even though this is like a totally different person with a different set of profiles from the last person I hung, you know what I mean? And so I don't know if it's a should. That said, I think that it depends on like the energy makeup of the partner that you want to be with. So I would love to be like, we're all free from the way that we've been socialized and like the dramas and the movies that we watch, but we're not. And so I'll just share my personal experience. So several years ago, I used to be like, I'm a feminist, I can ask men out. And I would like go up to guys and be like, hey, sailor, you know, and like try to be all cute and stuff. And what I noticed is that the men who responded well to that were men who were more compatible with a woman who was the leader in the relationship and who was the initiator. And I got real tired of that real fast. And so I made the conclusion for myself where I was like, I live life so hungrily and at like such an ambitious scale that like at the very least, a guy that I'm going to be with needs to be able to like muster up the courage to talk to me, because like I'm not threatened by that, right? Like I was like, what's the worst that could happen? They reject me. Okay. You know what I mean? So I was like, I was just like really clear that was just like one teeny little qualifier for me, was that like I needed to be with somebody that was like, that wasn't going to be crushed by rejection. Like it doesn't feel good, but like, again, in the context. So I stopped doing that because I didn't want to, and me taking the lead and pursuing was actually quite repellent to men who would be the kind of men who would like hold a really strong structure and leadership role in a partnership. I did all this like anecdotal research where I was like asking everybody like, so how would you feel if like, what about this scenario? What about this scenario? And deduce this information. And so I don't think it's a matter of should, because I have clients who are women, right? Who they are CEO, right? Like they have a very animated, the languaging I use is alpha omega versus like masculine feminine, but they have a very animated alpha energy that has supported them to build and lead successful companies. And sometimes they're like, well, you know, I'm like, go for it, try it, see how it feels, and then come back and like share with me, like, did that feel good? Did you like taking the lead in that moment? If you didn't, then like learn from that information and then make evolving decisions accordingly.
That makes complete sense. So just in a nutshell, and this is actually why I wanted you on the podcast, just like a free consulting session. So so thank you for that. But so do you give, so I align with you and I agree. The woman that I would probably be most compatible with isn't somebody that's going to take the lead and like come talk to me. Like I feel like the one that I would be most compatible with would be somebody I would just muster up the courage and go talk to. With that being said, do you give any type of like, so you don't go initiate anymore, or that's just something you've decided wasn't a fit for you, but do you give any type of signal to the man that there is some interest, even though he has to still come up and like initiate convo?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. So this is the thing. This memo got like lost, right? Where, if you watch rom-coms, and not because they are like great places to look for authority, but they're great places to look for how we've been socialized. So you'll notice in a rom-com, if there's like the male romantic lead and then there's the female romantic lead, right? And they'll like it'll be a house party, like a bar or something, right? And like she'll catch him looking at her, and then like every single time she will then like turn her back and like ignore him and like try not to get caught, right? And it's this crazy thing because when has somebody like this is what I tell my clients who are women is I'm like, when have you ever been in a scenario where someone ignored you and you were like, oh, they must be attracted to me, right? Like when someone ignores you, your first thought is, wow, okay, like I wonder if I said something, or maybe there's something like
I'm
maybe,
fucking creeping them out or something. Yeah.
yeah. So what I tell my clients who are women in particular, I'm like, it's your job to let him know that his attention is welcome, right? Because especially because by and large, as women, we walk through the world with these energetic boundaries and barriers up because like when we're on our way to the coffee shop and we're like trying to get to work, let's say, like we don't want some random dude to hit on us, especially because like most of our experiences with random dudes hitting on us are like maybe like a houseless man who is not sober, right? It can be a little bit scary. Or our experiences of like random people hitting on us are people who like don't take the hint at a dance venue, or it's a group of men, which can be incredibly triggering for like any woman who's experienced like sexual intimidation or sexual assault, right? So what I tell them is like, so we walk around with these boundaries up being like, I'm just trying to get through my day, like please don't bother me. So any guy who's like emotionally self-aware, who's like socially in tune, who's energetically online, right? Like he's not going to violate that boundary. He's like, oh, okay, she doesn't want to be bothered. And so what we're doing is we're actually blocking out the exact caliber of men that we want to connect with. So with women, I often say like eye contact. It's so simple, but just like making eyes and smiling. If there's somebody in the room that you're attracted to, like, and you catch their gaze, like just smile at them. Like, and this is actually my super secret weapon trick that I teach her, which is like, look him in the eyes and smile and just think to yourself, like, I'd love for you to come over and talk to me. And then like, go back about your business. And if you catch eyes again, do it again. And it's like, they all come back astounded that this works because like, I don't know where the memo got lost that basically all a good man needs is like a beautiful, welcoming smile. And like that will give him the courage to come over and say hello. But the memo got lost. So oddly enough, that's like one of the things that I teach the women in my programs.
That's really good. And yeah, I can probably back that up. Out of all the women I've talked to over the years, I feel like the ones ignoring me, I didn't like rush over to chat with.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your clients a few times. What is your ideal client, or who do you typically work with?
Yeah, so they come from a lot of different walks of life, but by and large, like entrepreneurs, executives. I've also attracted several like public figures who want to get this handled, but like prefer anonymity because their life is lived in the public eye. But what they have in common is a few things. One is they are very like growth oriented, have been like they're not new to personal development. Two is they've either they're at the plot point in their life where they're like, you know what, like I really want a partnership. I'm tired of sort of like haphazardly shooting in the dark, being like, I hope this one works. And there's someone who, by and large, has like this sneaking suspicion. Like they've looked around the world, for the most part, they don't see a relationship they don't see very many, if any, relationships are at the caliber that they secretly dream to create. But that inkling that the caliber of partnership they want is out there is one of the reasons why they haven't settled yet. Right. So, so I would say that's kind of like they're psychographic. That's what they look like.
That that last one actually kind of hit a chord with me because that's what I feel like comes up with me is I meet a lot of great women, and it's not like I
Mhm.
can put a finger and be like they don't have this quality or they're just bad. There's just something missing there. So
Yeah.
why do you feel that typically is? And is this again? This is from. It sounds like men and women in leadership positions. Um, why do you think we have that feeling? Does it correlate with us being in a leadership position and being committed to growth?
Uh, yes and no. So I think that most people actually feel this way. I think that what I've noticed with I call them the optimization population because it's like it's a population of people who like they want to optimize health, they want to optimize wealth, they want to optimize their business, they want to like right like they gravitate towards these optimizing things in every area of life. Um, and and so this that exact same phenomenon is happening for them in love and relationship. But and I wrote this in when I was like sending you some information of things that I'm sort of like weird and geeky about, which is I think that like romantic partnership in particular is like the final frontier of the transformation industry. And it's like people have no problem giving themselves permission to hire a personal trainer, research nutrition protocols, get an expensive membership at a gym when they want to optimize their health. People don't have a lot of problem like hiring a business coach or bringing in consultants or like a tech specialist to build their funnel. Like they'll invest all this money into making their business the most effective, most profitable model they can, right? And then when it comes to love, there's this myth that's governing most people's behavior, which is like, well, if I'm a good person, it should just happen. Which is kind of crazy, right? To think that like when you look at like how complex and nuanced people are, how much programming we absorb from our family of origins and from the media, to think that we can just like I call it the lottery model, right? Like, yeah, a few people win the lottery, but that would not be your like wealth creation strategy, would it? And
Obviously
yet
not.
that's
Yeah.
this, yeah. And it's like, cool. Yeah. Because whenever I share this with people, they're like, yeah, but like, I know a couple that did that. And I'm like, yeah, but they're like the only couple, who like ran into each other at like a country music concert in the 70s, and like, but think about all of the humans you've come across, you know what I mean? So is there's this final frontier where I think the partnership industry is really like just budding too. So it wasn't until I was reading like a article about the history of marriage. It wasn't until the 1970s that choosing marriage and partnership based on love was even socially normalized. Since the 70s, that's only 50 years.
Yeah, our parents' generation. Yeah.
Yeah, before that, it was very much about like resource allocation, social and political alliances. It wasn't about like love and fulfillment and joy and like friendship and companionship, passion, eroticism. Like, so any wisdom we're trying to take from like earlier generation, any wisdom about dating, any wisdom about marriage or partnership is not designed to create what I see the use of the world craving to create, which is a relationship that amplifies every other area of your life, who's your confidant, your friend, your like erotic play partner, lover, right? Like this like very multidimensional thing. And so I think we're at this stage where there's a lot of there's a lot of people, I think, for the first time in history, giving themselves permission to create partnership and source partnership with intention and purpose. And that's going to look a lot different than like meeting random people and like crossing your fingers and hoping that you win the lottery.
Yeah. Now that makes complete sense. And I kind of have the same view about therapy. Like people talk to me like investing in mental health has some sort of negative stigma as well, but people invest in the gym, they invest in business, they invest in their clothes, but like God forbid you go to a therapist, you're a fucking psycho, which is crazy. So I guess what you're saying is don't take advice from people that have no clue what they're talking about. Like even though their heart's probably in the right place, they just have
Yeah.
they're not who we should be taking advice from.
Yeah. Like I have a whole workshop I do about, it's like dating myth busting, where I take all of the most commonly shared dating, like love finds you when you're not looking for it. Dating is a numbers game. It must be divine timing. You're too picky. You have to like all of the, like you have to be willing to compromise more. All of the stuff, your standards are too high, right? All of the
Yeah.
advice or the like conventional wisdom that's circulated. And I'm like, this is why this is bananas. This is why it doesn't work. And this is why you should stop giving this advice and stop believing this advice.
That actually sounds like a pretty cool workshop. I'd be down to sign up for that.
Cool. Yeah.
So, because monogamy is something that humans have really only done, I believe, since the invention of private property was when monogamy started being formed, which is probably less than 1% of the time that humans have been on this planet, because it's only like maybe a few thousand BC or something people started owning property. And like, do you feel we're made to be monogamous like all equally, or do you feel like everybody's just different in that sense? Like, what are your thoughts on just monogamy in general?
Yeah. So I think there's a relationship structures can look as varied as the people who want to create and practice them. I think there's a really important distinction between being like, and I'm not an expert in like open relationship or polyamorous. I've only like dabbled in it enough to like really talk about why I teach and practice what I practice. But so I like to differentiate between monogamy and ethical monogamy. Which you'll hear in the more poly community, where they'll talk about like ethical non-monogamy. Polyamory is thrown around a lot, open relationships thrown around a lot. But by and large, I think humans are pretty bad at relationship, simply because they're underinformed. They're making decisions in response to like trauma versus like co-creating a vision with somebody. And so I think that whether it's ethical non-monogamy or ethical monogamy, both of those structures can be exquisite sources for growth over the long term and over a lifetime. I don't think one is better than the other. I think that it's really important to understand the intentions and the desires that are driving those preferences. I think that monogamy can be practiced really painfully and unethically. I think that's what we see most people doing. I think that's why, like, I'll say like marriage is not necessarily a success metric of a relationship, because how many miserable people do you know married, right? And so I would say that's unethical monogamy. That's monogamy that's been chosen because that's what they're supposed to do, because they haven't created a culture of communication where they can really talk about like why they're choosing monogamy, whether or not they've even like imagined or explored what non-monogamy could look for them. And then vice versa. I think polyamory is also practiced painfully and unethically in a lot of ways. And also in opposition to monogamy, or monogamy in opposition to polyamory, right? So again, like with every question you ask me, I'm like, it's not that simple.
Yeah, I mean that's why I'm asking. Maybe I need to broaden my mind a little. And I do think monogamy is like, I think it can be practiced, at least what I think for me, when I'm ready, and if it's like the actual fit, and if there's that open line of communication. Just from what I know, I haven't had like a super long term monogamous relationship, but I think it's possible with where I'm at. But to your point, what I think happens, and I don't know if you recall, but when there was the Ashley Madison data breach, it was like all
Mm,
married Christian men that were members. It's just like we
mm,
have a society that tells people they should get married, tells people they should live this life. And I feel like so many humans aren't even making that decision consciously themselves. It's
mm,
just societal pressure. And I feel like I need to have many experiences and be able to make my own decision to be like, okay, this is the right like structure for me based off of what feels right and experiences for me, not based on my religion or what my parents did or what my friends are doing or whatever. Like how big or how do you feel society is just impacting our relationships in modern day, or like societal pressure?
yeah. So I would say that most people get married and have kids for the wrong reasons. Um, Especially having kids. Um, so I think you're totally right. I think, like obviously society plays a huge, there's such a stigma about non-monogamy. And there, like, it's just interesting too that like we will admire like a miserable marriage more than we admire people, like, oh, they've been together for 35 years. And you like look at them and you're like, they do not look happy. And yet we're like celebrating that as like some sort of achievement. Right. So, I think what's super important is like, regardless of where you're at in your self-discovery around the structure you want is, are you showing up transparently to your partner or partners? Um, and are you really, because this is what I think with monogamy and non-monogamy is people, it all filtering it through like me meeting my needs, which I'm like, yes. And that shouldn't come at the expense of other people, right? So it's like, are you meeting your needs while also taking other people into consideration? And I think it's that second part of the question that can um, gets lost. And I think that's what gives both of them the negative stigmas they do. So is like, I mean, I'm like, experiment away, figure it out, figure out what feels the best for you. And also like, I mean, if there's anything, I say this on like every interview it is, if there's anything people walk away from with this is like, give yourself a hall pass to be really curious about this and think, what if everything I assume to be true about relationship is wrong? And like go read books, listen to podcasts, and hire a consultant. And right, like if you really embrace the fact that the information, the catalog you have has come from your religious background, your family of origin, which most people I know who look at their family of origin have a lot of qualms with, like, I wouldn't want to recreate that relationship, even if they've been together for 40 years, or media, and then relational trauma too. Like the way that we've been hurt informs a lot of, when you think about that, like that's not a very sophisticated, intelligent, high caliber body of information.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, okay, what if I acknowledge that that's where I've been operating from? And then like I have in business, or like I have in health, or like I have in like travel, is like, learn about it. Like just give yourself, it's okay to be a student in this area. Basically everybody on the planet is, and like start to learn about what creating relationship intentionally looks like, and what communicating looks like, and all of the like invisible language, like love languages, erotic languages. There's just like such
is there an erotic languages?
Yeah. Well, there's a
That's
lot. There's a lot of different.
I know
Yeah,
love languages, obviously, but erotic languages I'm not as familiar
yeah. Erotic blueprints is what they're called. They're started by a woman named Jaya. And that's just like one of the many different ways that you can think about it this way. For all of the teachers there are in business, there are, I don't know if it's at the same volume, right? But like there's just as many nuances and things to discover about relationship relating um, available.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, and that's, and by the way, I will agree that we applaud bad marriages when in all actuality, like, I kind of feel more sad and disappointed that this person's spending their whole life with somebody that's just making them unhappy, and like, or that just maybe it's not one person making the other unhappy, it's just a bad dynamic. And I would see this all the time. My first job was at Bob Evans in Florida, and it was a breakfast restaurant, mostly old people. And there are people, when I old, I guess I would define as, sorry for any older people listening, but I would say like 70s and 80s would be like, all right, I consider them like old, and they would be there eating breakfast and they wouldn't say one word to each other like the whole breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just at that point they're just like living together and just, but they're not like enjoying each other. Like they would be there seriously like just looking really pissed off, just be really rude. And I would see this multiple times a day. I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
so, and I imagine that's been going on for a really long time. It didn't just start that morning at breakfast. And you see it
Yeah.
so often. Like, why do you think why do you think we settle so much as humans? And well, we settle in a lot of areas of our lives, but especially relationships. What do you feel that is?
Um, well, again, like there is a default culture around relationship, and it's stuff like marriage is hard. Um, like you need to make some compromises. There's so much messaging that like that's really shaming of men and women about like you want the perfect partner, like your standards are too high. That person doesn't exist. That's like a pipe dream. And so the default culture on dating a relationship is one that really advocates and reinforces settling.
Yeah.
And and so then you also, and just like with anything, right? Like when someone is settling in their own marriage, and let's say they're a family member or a friend, they will encourage you to settle. It's like they're crabs pulling the pot. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You put a bunch of crabs in a pot, and one tries to climb out, the other crabs below will pull it in. Um, and so it settling is what's normalized, and there is an unconscious motivator for someone who is settling to encourage other people to settle, because if you refuse to settle and you create something extraordinary, they cannot help. Their unconscious cannot help to be like, well, if they did it, why didn't I do it? And that's an incredibly like scary, vulnerable place for a person to be forced to look at. And so I think it's like settling begets settling begets settling,
So
which is, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so like friends or parents or just people that are having influence in their life, even maybe the person in the relationship, because they were afraid to get out of their comfort zone and not settle, they just force everybody in their life to settle, like subconsciously, so they feel better
I
about
don't know if they
themselves.
force it. It reinforces that that's what relationships look like, that
Got it.
that's normal, that that's okay. And so that's why you hear stuff like marriage is hard. Marriage is absolutely complex. Partnership is complex. But what I've noticed with the work that I do and in my own partnership, doing the work, like choosing to do the work, is effortless. It's
Yeah.
such an easy yes, because I know every time because we're both committed to the work. Every time I know that, like when we get to one of those crunchy moments or those misunderstandings or those ruptures, we both know what's on the other side is deepened trust, deepened intimacy, deepened love, deepened like more expansive freedom for both of us and the partnership, right? But that's not what people are saying when they say marriage is hard. They're saying you're going to have to put up with some stuff you don't like. And we just hear it over and over and over. And so it's treated as truth, as like relational law.
Yeah.
So I also want to say, anybody who's listening, and you, right? If there's like that quiet voice that's like refusing to let you settle, you're like designed to break free from the herd. Like you're designed to be I would say like there's an opportunity here for you to be a vanguard of the kind of relationship that's like wanting to become expressed through people right now. And there's more and more people, like the transformation industry is huge now, right? So like personal growth and introspection and self-awareness is becoming popularized. Mindfulness is becoming popularized. And so there's more people than ever that are building the skill sets to create intentional partnership than ever before. And so whoever's listening to this, right? If that's you, if you have that still quiet voice, the response is not to like collapse and conform back into the default wisdom, the default narrative, the default behavior, but is to listen to that and say, okay, what's being asked of me is to become like an avid explorer and researcher and disruptor and innovator. Their information out there will help me create the kind of relationship I want. So what does it look like if I actually treat this like a priority, the way I have with my business or my health or my living situation or my wardrobe, and I actually like let relationship be a top priority and then like self-educate accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. Verbiage is so important. Like my friend Dave, who I'm in his coaching group, he'll have this part of we typically do it once a quarter. There'll be like adult conversations you need to have, and they're called adult conversations, not tough conversations. Like adult conversations, just like part of life. Okay, like we get it. Some are going to be hard, but like you just got to have them. And like calling them adult conversations is more optimistic way to look at it, just because it's part of life. Like if you're going to build wealth or you're going to build business or you're going to have a successful relationship, fucking of course there's going to be some tough conversations in there. But wording them as adult conversations for me has been hey, I just need to have an adult conversation with this person. And I'll even say that as I'm like framing the conversation. I'll be like, hey, do you mind if we have an adult conversation? Rather than tough conversation, which has a negative connotation. Like adult conversations are just part of life. And saying marriage is hard is kind of similar. Like marriage is complex is what you said. I like that a lot better than marriage is hard, because that's true. And we all know a relationship with somebody for many months or many years, of course there's going to be hurdles. Like that's just how life is. I hear from guys all the time, older guys will be like, fuck, don't get married, like don't get married like me. Oh, you're still single. Oh, you're so lucky. Just like that type of stuff is enforced all the time as well. And I'm just like, why are you married? Like, what would you say to that? If there's just somebody, and this may be like what a therapist can help with. I don't know if you've ever helped with that, but if someone's just in a really bad relationship and they're afraid to take the leap to get out, is that a type of person you've helped before?
Yeah. So I've worked with couples, but my preference is, first of all, my preference is to work with people who are single because I'd like to help you build the house right the first time versus be brought in to renovate a hack job. When I have worked with couples, or I've also worked with business partners before, I say like, my goal is not to keep you together. That's not my bias. That's not my outcome. My outcome is to figure out what does the partnership look like when it's thriving. And that requires the parties involved to be thriving. So a partnership is not healthy if one person is in a position of sacrifice or martyrdom, period. I know like a lot of moms in particular where like martyrdom culture is really normalized. Actually, I would say entrepreneur fathers as well. Like, I'm doing this for my family, right? And it's all sacrifice, right? Anytime like sacrifice is at play, like there's corrosion happening, full stop, period. So, I'll just walk through this hypothetical. So what I would do is I would, working with somebody who came to me who was unhappy in a partnership, and I have had people come to me more so where they're like, I'm with somebody and I'm pretty sure they're not my person. Or they come to me when they're in the throes of the divorce. But I would say, well, first of all, we need to get really clear on what are your standards as a partner, not based on your partnership or the other person, but like when you go into yourself and it's like, this is the kind of man I'm going to be to my wife, or this is the kind of woman I'm going to be to my husband. And like create, I call it the, like a covenant. So Queen's Covenant, Sovereign's Covenant, for non-binary folks. King's Covenant is coming in and being like, what are my agreements with myself that are unconditional for how I show up? Because that's my standard for partnership. And the reason that they have to be agreements with self and the reason they have to be unconditional is because if they're based on whether or not your partner's being in a bad mood or not, then they're not, like, then your partnership is at the whim of your mood or your partner's mood. And that's an unbelievably powerless place to be. So the first thing I would do is be like, okay, let's map out what are, like, when you future pass, like, who are you as like a formidable husband or a formidable partner? And then we would come up with what those agreements are, which could be something like, the agreement could be like, I take space when I need space, because I can't take care of my partnership if I'm not taking care of myself, right? It's not always like give, sacrifice more and more and more. That's not healthy. One of mine is when I most want to close my heart, I open it, because one of the ways that if my feelings get hurt or I misinterpret something or there's a miscommunication or if I experience disappointment, my reaction would be to like shut down, away, draw love, right? And it's totally defensive. But what that does is it makes my partner feel like they're left hung out to dry. Even if, let's say, he was being the kind of a jerk in the morning or something, I'm committed to how I show up for partnership. So that would be step number one. And then I'd be like, okay, now go implement for 90 days or whatever, because it's an easy way out to blame the other person for your misery when you haven't really been tending. She's not weeding the garden. And I'm like, yeah, neither are you, dude.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. I work with women too, where it's like, let's figure out how you show up, and then we're going to hold you accountable to that vision. And I've seen relationships turn around where, I thought for sure they were going to break up, and he was an alcoholic. And within the span of 6 months, their relationship had radically transformed because she stopped making him the scapegoat for her unhappiness in the partnership, and she really started taking responsibility. I've also seen this happen where the person takes responsibility, and then after those 90 days, it's really, really clear, right? Like, it's like, I showed up powerfully, I showed up generously, I showed up and I had those adult conversations. And after 90 days, my partner actually, they didn't change. They didn't start to meet me there. They actually dug their heels in more and maybe like escalated fights or difficulties, but I'm confident that I showed up in a way that was in integrity with who I say I am. And so either way, showing up with that deeper level of commitment to like your vision for partnership, your vision for yourself as a partner, creates the clarity you need to decide if you're going to leave or not.
I like that a lot, actually. And that's great, where it's like your goal isn't to force people to be together. It's really to just uncover and see if it's even a fit, which again seems fucking healthy. I agree. I don't like how society, it's like, great, if they've been married for 40 years and they're happy, like, they deserve a round of applause. That's amazing. If they're been married for 40 years and they're unhappy, it's just like, how scared are they for change in their life? Like, it's just kind of sad. Like, I don't applaud that as much,
Yeah. Well, like I said, most people get married for the wrong reasons. So you might as well end it for the right ones, And I've worked with some of my oldest clients are in their late 60s and early 70s. And like, one of my clients met the love of her life at 74.
That's awesome.
Like, love of her life. You know what I mean? And she could have been like, I'll stay in that unhappy marriage, It's like, or she gets to live the last 2 to 3 decades of her life with a man who like worships the ground she walks on and who she adores.
That's amazing.
Like, yeah.
I wanted to ask too, so you work with all these people that are in some sort of leadership capacities, have some sort of influence. Are there common challenges across the board typically that you see, like common hurdles for them to find this partner?
Yeah. So I would say the number one hurdle is giving themselves permission to make it a priority. We as like entrepreneurs, founders, public person, we are so good at pouring our time and energy and attention into our professional world because we usually see a direct ROI, right? Like if I show up all day, I get this stuff done, my team runs with it, the launch goes well, right? So there's this immediate ROI and it's quite linear. So it's so seductive to, and we've had great success, you know? So it's like, awesome, right? Like I'll just pour energy here, see results, feels good. But our track record around dating and relationship is I pour energy in, I see haphazard results at best, most of which I'm disappointed in. So let me not do that, right? Like that's like, it's totally logical that people would then people will pull that kind of like, they'll sort of dabble a little bit and then put all of their energy into where they like a place where they can see returns. So, but what I want people to hear is that that's just because the strategies haphazard. That's why you're getting the haphazard disappointing results versus like giving yourself permission for it to be a priority and then to treat like the other priorities in their life they show up for in these very like resourceful, curious, innovative ways. But again, like just due to sort of like the infancy of the mindset around relationship, they don't then implement that same level of like executive acumen to being resourceful and creative and innovative around love. So I would say that's like the biggest pitfall is they overwork and make themselves busy versus I think it takes a lot of fucking courage. Ooh, can you beep that out? I don't know
No,
how long this went.
I've cussed like 5 times, but it's
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Yeah,
I think it takes a lot more courage to admit that you want something, like a relationship, because then it is to like, if it happens, it happens. You know what I mean? Because we also have, there's a mindset running around where if you admit that you want it, that must mean you're either desperate or secretly unhappy or not empowered or not as, that you don't love yourself. And therefore you're already doing it wrong. Where I'm like, with any other desire in life, we don't say like, oh, you want greater wealth? Okay, well, you must be like secretly unhappy or disempowered
yeah.
or like, you know?
So on that thread, and that's kind of we like started the conversation. My answer to you was, I really want human connection, but I don't like want to say like I'm like I need a relationship. Is that like typical shit that you work through?
Yeah. So when I heard that, I had like an idea for a couple of, I would love to ask them like different questions that maybe you haven't been asked before, which is, because it looks very different when people are like, I really do just want to experience a lot of flavors of person because I'm in this like really exploratory phase of like trying to get clear on what I want versus a fear of saying that you want relationship because like the truth, like I don't want a relationship just for the sake of having a relationship. I don't want a family just for like the sake of having kids. Like I want the spiritual ROI that I perceive comes with having a really incredible partner. The connection, the intimacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think my question would be for you would be, or how do I want to, it would be more along the lines of like, are you craving a really incredible partnership and you have the patience to, and you're like patiently and curiously and courageously showing up for the journey to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
So as you were just sharing, I was trying to think, is it me not wanting to say I want a relationship, or is it me just trying to see the different flavors? And what feels right for me is like I feel like the last 2 or 3 years is I'm finally getting into the best version of myself, like self-confidence. Like I'm honestly like healthier now than I've ever been. I feel like I'm just like in a really good mindset. Like I kind of like just like navigating the world and like the best version of myself now, and just like seeing what type of connections out there, and not saying like I need like a single connection, and like,
Mhm.
and again, if something more serious is a byproduct of good human connection, I'm very open to that. But like I kind of enjoy, like, for the first time in my life, like I felt like as a teen or even in my early mid 20s, I like lacked a whole bunch of self-confidence, and I just like I really didn't love who I was, and that's why I got into like business so early, is because it just, I thought it would make me happy. I thought people would like me more if I started earning money and just all those things. So I feel like this is like one of the first times I can walk around as somebody I'm like truly proud of. And like with that, it
Mm.
I kind of enjoy just like being able to just like talk to multiple women. And not saying like I have to be like romantic with all of them or anything, but just having like that confidence to do that I never had, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, very much so.
So yeah, I think I have you read the book The Rational Male?
Mm-mm.
I want your opinion on this. It talked about how a man how men typically, he called them snipers. He said like what you don't want to be as a man is a sniper, where you just invest all your energy in the courting phase into one woman. He's like, what you want to be is a plate spinner, where you have like, you picture like a man like spinning 10 plates and like balancing 10 plates. And then from that, it if a plate falls off or a couple plates fall off or whatever, you can spin more plates. And then from that, if something serious develops, like then you invest into one serious thing. But I felt like the mistake I made for basically my whole adult life was being that sniper. Like I would just invest my time and energy early on into the, like, we're talking like phase one, like we're just started hanging out, and I invest all my energy into that person. And from that, with like codependency tendencies and stuff like that, it would inevitably just like push them away, or
Mhm.
like it wasn't a fit on my end or whatever. But like, what are your thoughts on like that, like plate spinning analogy I just made? Does
Yeah.
what I'm saying make sense? Like early in it, not saying I would never commit to a relationship and be a liar, to be clear, but just like rather than invest all your energy into one person, which is what I've done historically. And I feel, looking back at it, like if I could tell my 18-year-old self something, that would be something I told myself is, you know,
Mm.
invest when it's a mutually agreed commitment. Be at that point, that's a mutually agreed commitment. But before that, like stop like being a sniper basically, and stop like putting this person on a pedestal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think in my work I call it exploration dating. I think everybody should be dating multiple people. And they need to slow down enough to get clear on what that has to look like so that they can remain grounded and connected to self. Um, so, like for me, I could not sleep with multiple people at the same time. Like that just that just like totally got because like oxytocin, bonding hormone, like me being intimate with more than one person was such an emotional, like, crazy town, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to look at what I need in order to be able to show up grounded in service to what I want to create, to be my most empowered, confident self. And that was like certain boundaries around intimacy. And yeah, the sniper model is like you're going all in on someone and you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
You don't know if they're gonna when something uncomfortable comes up, if they're gonna meet you in that conversation, or if they're gonna make you wrong about it, or if they're gonna avoid it, XYZ, right? So when people go all in and like pick one person very early on, what they're going all in on is a fantasy. So it's an incredibly out of touch way to date and show up for a relationship. I usually tell my clients to be dating like 3 to 5 people at any given time. Again, knowing what the boundaries they need to have with themselves and others are, and being radically transparent about it. So, again, when I was doing this years ago, it was like, usually the guy I was seeing would like ask, "Oh, are you seeing anyone else?" And I would be like, "Yeah." Like, and can I tell you why? And I would say, what I'm showing up for is I want to create a really magnificent relationship with somebody. And I believe that takes time to get to know someone. I think I need to see them over a number of seasons. And what I'm really looking for is somebody whose vision for what they want to create with their life is aligned with my own. And again, like, it takes time to get to know somebody, to know if like there's compatibility. There's not only like attraction and and fun and adventure, but also compatibility and generosity in times of uncertainty. And I would say, and I trust that, like, if I'm seeing somebody and the more that we get to know each other, he sees that future as something exciting that he would like to explore with me, I trust that he'll let me know. And I said that to like every single guy I was dating. It was always well received. It was well received because I also didn't withhold details about what I wanted to create early on. So when people would be like, "What are you looking for?" I'd be like, "This is the big, bold, expansive life I want." And some guys were like, "Oh my God, that is like, you're a lot, you're intense." I'm like, not my guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if my amazing globetrotting life of like immense like success and like experience, right? If that's too big for you, then like great. It's really good we're learning this on date number 1 versus becoming emotionally involved and entrenched. And then 6 months in discovering like you don't want to co-create. The vision you want for your life is not aligned with the vision I want for my life. So yeah, I very much believe in dating multiple people. I believe in being fully transparent and generous about it with the people you're seeing, because if not, then they're not actually, like, it needs to be consensual, you know?
Define date. Like, what is 3 to 5? Like, is dating, the definition of dating, just different for each person, or what do you like for your clients? Like, what do you recommend that definition of dating be for 3 to 5?
Yeah. Like, I would say you're not in a relationship until you're not in a committed partnership until you've had a conversation and committed to partnership. But it's very normalized to like not talk about it and like not label things. You know what I mean? And I'm like, to me, that's really interesting that, like, imagine going into business with somebody and not making sure you were explicitly on the same page.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you would never do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So much of this is like bringing a totally different culture of communication to the way you date. And I also fundamentally believe like being willing to have those adult conversations is the exact mechanism that gives you the clarity of whether or not this person is capable of creating the caliber of partnership you want. Right? So if you have a conversation, you're like, yeah, well, I am seeing other women, and like, I'd like to share with you why that is, because I really want you to like understand why I'm doing it and be opting into dating me with all the information you need to make the like right informed decision for you. And if she like gets really jealous and upset, I'm going to tell you right now, that's really important information for you to have to make decisions about whether or not you can you see her. Or if she's like, wow, I'm really impressed with like the intentionality you put into this. I'm seeing other people too. You know, like, the fact that you shared this with me this way makes me feel like safer, and I would love to continue exploring this with you. That's really amazing information to say that this might be a really powerful contender for partnership.
Yeah.
So
I agree with you, by the way, completely. And it took me a long time to agree with this after lots of lonely nights, I guess. But I've had tons of women over the years say I'm like too much, or just like terms like that, like say I'm too much, or just whatever that means. Like I don't know if you hear that term a lot, but I'm just like, I used to feel insecure about that and doubt myself because of it. And then it took me a while, like last couple of years, to be like, that's them telling me it's just not a fit. But for years I was just giving myself a super hard time about that, and I would build a lot of insecurities because of it. Now I'm just like, great, they're telling me I'm too much like early on. That's like great news, so I don't have to invest time and energy. But it took me a long time to get to that point mentally.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that there's potentially another layer of nuance. Yes, you're right. Like if somebody thinks that you're too much, that's a really powerful indicator that they're probably not your person. Um, versus somebody who's just like, oh my gosh, this person lives life at the scale I do. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think is really powerful about exploration dating is like you said, you would go all in on somebody almost before the connection has built a foundation that can handle that much. So I think when you have exploration dating and you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket prematurely, then you don't fall into that pattern of giving someone more than they've actually like consented to holding yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Because the full like one person's full force of love is a lot. And if you've only been on 3 dates and this person still needs the space and they're still getting to know you and you're still like finding each other's edges, to like hand your heart over to someone when they haven't actually said they're ready or willing or committed to stewarding that is a lot. It might not be that you're too much. It might be that it's actually just premature, right? Like the foundation hasn't congealed yet in order to start like putting studs on. So I think that's another really powerful reason for like why it can be beneficial to date multiple people.
I agree completely, just based off of, I would say, a short, recent, maybe the last year or so, and then I turned 30, so I guess let's just say I'll count 18 to 29, or between 29 and 30, just in this year experience, I can say like more of this exploration, talking to multiple, it's just a much better place to be mentally. Like, and then
Yeah.
I agree with you too, in maybe cases I was being too much just because I was focusing all my energy on them when it was premature and we hadn't committed to that. So it all makes sense now. At the time, it was tough to deal with. But
Hard. Yeah.
yeah, it now I understand. So I'm just I I don't know. I guess like I was like, this is what I would tell my son. Like if I have a son one day, like this is exactly what I'm going to tell him about dating. And it's just like, hey, treat women with respect, be a gentleman, but don't fucking commit until it's a committed relationship. Like if I could have just told myself that at 18, man, I feel like it just would have been. But we all learn things at different stages, and that's okay. I guess final question I would say, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up that just involves dating, or any common myths, or just anything going on in 2020 right now you feel would be valuable or interesting for the audience?
I think what's really interesting, I don't know. I think it's like never too late to make this a priority if it really is. And also like really reinforce for people that if you're not making a priority, it's gonna be really hard to create the results you say you want. Like with anything, like you want a healthy, strong, body, and always like, oh, I'll do it later, or like you get the gym membership, but then you like don't do it consistently, right? And then you're like, oh, like what I see is people, like again, the optimization population, they want an epic partnership, and then the way they approach it is very casual. It's very sort of laissez-faire, and that's not how most epic results are created from like kind of like dabbling. And I think there is a stigma and a fear that like, well, if I put intention into it, then that means I'm desperate, or that I'm already doing it wrong, right? Because it's supposed to, quote, just happen. And I think I said this before, but it's just like wanting people to give themselves permission that like, if you do it intentionally, you will create results that far outstrip what you see around you, in satisfaction and fulfillment, in level of connectivity, in your shared eroticism, the adventures you get to have with the person, et cetera, et cetera. And clarity attracts clarity. So if any resistance there is to getting clear will continue to attract people who are unclear. You will continue to attract people who are as unclear as you are, you know? Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, I feel like I have this like mission. I want to like destigmatize working on, the way Brene Brown has destigmatized shame and created these really amazing multidimensional conversations about like shame and vulnerability. I would love to destigmatize what it looks like to like work on and intentionally create the love story we want, and have those like more multidimensional conversations.
Yeah. No, that's great. And that, again, thanks for this consulting session. No, it's
You're welcome.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I love Brene Brown, by the way. I know you talked about clarity a lot. Like, that's her whole thing. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And I'm assuming you've heard her say that before. Clear is kind.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my biggest takeaway from this conversation is just be okay with being your like true. And I feel like I'm like 90% there, but maybe there's like a few times where I'm like, should I be my true self, or should I, like, maybe it's a scarce mindset, maybe it's fear of, losing that person or whatever. But like, even more so after this, I'm just like, I just got to be my 100% true self, not 90%, which I feel like 90% I've come a long way, but I got to be like 100%.
I tell my clients all the time, like, let your freak flag fly. So, like, it's like, don't talk about politics, or don't talk, and I'm like, I think it's really important to examine like why that is. And the idea is like, well, don't talk about it because you don't want to scare people off. And yet my suspicion is you would like to be with somebody that can have like a curious, open-minded conversation about politics, or even better, like who you have like very similar political values.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, another dating myth of like, basically like so much of the dating myth is like, don't be yourself and don't want what you want, and you'll eventually find somebody. And I'm like, be yourself, want what you want, and then you'll actually find the right person.
I like that a lot too. And I will say something I've gotten good at is like, first time I'm hanging out with, like, we'll talk religion, politics, I don't give a shit. Like, if it comes to mind, I'm just like, this is what we're gonna talk about. Like, by the end of the first date, I like know where she stands politically. I know her like grandma's Catholic, or because why, like, that's where I think my business brain is helpful, because it's like, why invest too much time and energy if it's just not going to be a fit? Like, if we can have this conversation fifth time we're hanging out, why can't we have it the first time? Like, why would I just wait to have a conversation that's just like, what do you believe in life? No, we can't talk about that yet. We have to wait till day 5. Like, no, I'm going to talk about that.
But to wait till we're emotionally invested to find out that we're incompatible, right? It's like,
for me, crazy. I have to wait till I'm emotionally invested and committed to find out if we're compatible. Yeah, I feel like that's yeah. So that's where I definitely see some major improvements. So if any of these business executives, public figures, anything like that, that's a lot of like who my personal network is, and that's who, like, this is a newer show, but that's who my personal network is, obviously who I've started reaching out to and who's been listening to the show, and we've been growing it with our list and stuff like that. If any of these badasses that are ready for a strong partner in their life, if they want to reach out and contact you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the most direct line is probably Instagram. I'm on there pretty regularly. Do like quite a bit of dating and relationship advice, and sort of like gold nuggets like this in the stories and etc. You can also find me on Facebook. You'll include all the handles and stuff in the show notes.
Yeah, I can get that added for you.
Okay, great. And then the last thing I was going to say, so I'm a big fan of self-study, and I'm guessing your network is also the kind of people who have like 10 books on their nightstand. But I put together a book list of what I think are some of the most important books people can read if they are wanting to create like a conscious, self-perpetuating relationship that like deepens in growth and intimacy and trust over time. And they can get that at relationshipbooklist.com.
Okay. Relationshipbooklist.com.
Yeah, it's a PDF.
And we will make sure that all the links are in the show notes for people that want to contact you.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. Well, enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player so you get updated when new episodes are live. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support is to leave a 5-star review and share the podcast with people in your life that you feel would benefit from these types of discussions. Visit openlyoutspoken.com for additional details on the show. Find out how to connect with Jeremy on social media and learn more information about Jeremy's personal and business life. We'll see you next time.